April 10th, 1945. The Third Reich has less than 1 month to live. Berlin is surrounded. The Luftwaffe, once master of European skies, is a shadow of its former self. But on this spring morning, one German pilot would write his name into aviation history in a way that has never been repeated. By April 1945, Germany's situation was catastrophic. Soviet forces were closing in on Berlin from the east. American and British forces had crossed the Rhine in the west. The 1,000-year Reich, Hitler had promised, would last mere weeks. Yet, even in these dying days, Germany possessed one weapon that still struck fear into Allied airmen, the Messerschmitt Me 262 Schwalbe, or swallow the world's first operational jet fighter. With a top speed of 540 miles per hour, the Me 262 was approximately 100 miles per hour faster than the best Allied piston engine fighters. It was armed with 430mm Mk 108 cannons, weapons capable of shredding a B-17 Flying Fortress with just a handful of hits. In the hands of experienced pilots, it was lethal. But by April 1945, experienced pilots were in desperately short supply. So was fuel. So were spare parts. The Me 262 units were forced to operate from damaged airfields under constant Allied air attack, with inadequate maintenance facilities and fuel stocks measured in hours, not days. One of these units was Jagdgeschwader 7, or JG-7, based at Parchim Airfield, northwest of Berlin. JG-7 had been formed specifically to operate the Me 262, and by early 1945 was one of the few jet units still capable of mounting effective operations. Among its pilots was 22-year-old Leutnant Walter Hagenah, assigned to the third grouper, the third JG-7. Hagenah was relatively inexperienced compared to the veteran aces who had fought since 1939, but he had been trained on the Me 262 and understood its capabilities and limitations better than most. On the morning of April 10th, Hagenah would need every bit of that training. The day began like so many others in those final weeks. Air raid warnings, the distant rumble of heavy bombers, the wail of sirens. American 8th Air Force bombers were inbound, targeting what remained of Germany's industrial infrastructure and transportation networks. The raids had become almost routine. Hundreds of B-17 and B-24s, escorted by swarms of P-51 Mustangs and P-47 Thunderbolts, would methodically pound their targets, while German defences, such as they were, tried desperately to stop them. The order came through to 3/JG-7, scramble. Intercept the bomber stream north of Berlin. Hagenah and his wingmen ran to their aircraft. The Me 262 was a beautiful machine, sleek and purposeful, but it was also temperamental. The Jumo 004 jet engines were prone to flameouts if the throttles were advanced too quickly. The takeoff run required careful attention. And once airborne, fuel consumption was voracious. But when everything worked correctly, the Me 262 was magnificent. The two jets roared down the runway, their high-pitched engine whine cutting through the morning air. Hagenah's aircraft lifted off, gear retracting, climbing steeply below, the scarred German countryside fell away. Their mission was clear: find the bombers, attack, break off, return to base. The standard tactic was to approach from ahead and above, diving through the bomber formations at high speed, firing the heavy cannons in short bursts, then using superior speed to escape before the escorting fighters could react. But on this particular morning, Hagenah's Me 262 carried something different, something experimental. Mounted beneath his wings were R-4M rockets. The R-4M was an unguided air-to-air rocket measuring just 55 millimeters in diameter, designed to be fired in salvos at bomber formations. Each Me 262 could carry 24 of these weapons, 12 under each wing. The idea was simple: Approach a bomber formation, fire a massive spread of rockets, and watch the results. Even near misses could damage aircraft with their fragmentation warheads. But the R-4M had been designed for use against large, slow-moving bombers, not agile single-engine fighters. What Hagenah was about to attempt had never been done before, and if his account is to be believed, has never been done since. Hagenah and his wingman were heading north, scanning the skies for the bomber stream, when his wingman called out a warning. Above them, 6 contacts, dropping external fuel tanks, P-51 Mustangs. The P-51D Mustang was arguably the finest piston-engine fighter of World War II. With its laminar flow wing, powerful Packard-built Merlin engine, and 6.50 caliber machine guns, it could escort bombers all the way to Berlin and back, fighting the entire way if necessary. In a turning fight, it could outmaneuver most German fighters, and there were hundreds of them in the skies over Germany. The 6 Mustangs above Hagenah had spotted the 2 Me-262s and were diving to attack. Standard doctrine for Allied fighters was to catch the German jets during takeoff or landing, when they were slow and vulnerable. But these Mustangs had found their targets at altitude, and they were pressing their advantage. For a P-51 pilot, engaging a Me-262 was a calculated risk. If the jet pilot saw you coming and applied full throttle, there was nothing you could do. The Me-262 would simply accelerate away. But if you could catch the jet pilot by surprise or force him into a turning engagement, where the P-51's superior agility gave you the edge, you had a chance. Hagenah faced a critical decision. He could turn to fight, which would negate his speed advantage and likely end badly. He could try to run, but the Mustangs were already above him with altitude advantage. Or he could do something unexpected. He pushed the throttles forward to full military power, but instead of turning, instead of climbing, he maintained his heading and entered a gentle dive, and he was going to outrun them. The Me-262 accelerated. The airspeed indicator climbed. 400 miles per hour, 450, 480. The Mustangs were diving after him, their pilots no doubt firing, but at these closing speeds, even the experienced American pilots would have difficulty tracking their target. Then, Hagenah did something remarkable. He prepared to fire his R-4M rockets at the fighters pursuing him. The R-4M was not designed for this. It was an unguided projectile meant to be fired in salvos at large formations. Using it against a single-engine fighter required not just courage, but extraordinary timing and spatial awareness. Hagenah would have to estimate range, closure rate, and lead angle, all while travelling at over 500 miles per hour, with 6 enemy fighters on his tail. According to his own account, he selected his moment and fired. The rockets streaked away from the Me-262's wings, trailing smoke. And then, according to Hagenah, he watched as one of the pursuing Mustangs disintegrated in an explosion. He fired again. Another Mustang, he claimed, went down. The remaining American fighters, perhaps shocked by this unexpected turn of events, or perhaps simply unable to keep up with the accelerating jet, broke off their pursuit. Hagenah and his wingman, now low on fuel, turned for home. When Hagenah landed back at Parchim, he reported his engagement. 2 P-51 Mustangs destroyed, both with R-4M rockets. If true, it would have been an extraordinary achievement. Using unguided rockets against agile enemy fighters while being pursued at high speed would represent a level of skill and luck rarely seen in aerial combat. But there was a problem. By April 1945, German record-keeping had essentially collapsed. Units were being overrun, headquarters were being evacuated, and paperwork was often the last thing on anyone's mind. Confirmation of aerial victories required supporting evidence, witness statements, gun camera footage, wreckage recovery. In the chaos of the war's final weeks, such documentation was increasingly impossible to obtain. When the dust settled and historians began examining the records, they found confirmation for only one of Hagenah's claimed victories: a single P-51 Mustang shot down on April 10, 1945, with R-4M rockets. American 8th Air Force records were consulted, but provided little clarification. Losses were recorded, but matching them to specific engagements proved difficult. So what really happened that morning over Germany? We know that Hagenah engaged P-51 Mustangs. We know he was armed with R-4M rockets. We know that official records credit him with one confirmed kill using those rockets. That confirmed kill by itself represents a unique achievement in aviation history. It is believed to be the only time an American fighter was shot down by an unguided rocket fired from a Messerschmitt Me during an operational sortie, not bomber, not transport, fighter. But did Hagenah shoot down 2 Mustangs, as he claimed, or just one? The truth is, we will probably never know with absolute certainty. What we can say is this: in the confusion of aerial combat, pilots on all sides frequently overclaimed victories. This was not dishonesty, but the simple reality of combat aircraft, seen trailing smoke and diving away, were often claimed as destroyed when they may have limped home. Multiple pilots firing at the same target might all claim credit. And when travelling at hundreds of miles per hour, it was often impossible to observe the final fate of an enemy aircraft. German pilots in particular, by late 1945, were operating under immense stress. They were young, often inadequately trained, flying missions they knew were ultimately futile, defending a regime that was clearly doomed. If Hagenah genuinely believed he had shot down 2 aircraft, he may well have reported exactly what he thought he saw. The fact that only 1 kill was confirmed does not make him a liar. It makes him a combat pilot operating in the fog of war. Walter Hagenah survived the war. The Me-262, despite its revolutionary technology, arrived too late and in too few numbers to change Germany's fate. By May 1945, it was over. But Hagenah's engagement on April 10th remains significant for several reasons. First, it demonstrates the capabilities of the Me-262 even in the war's final days. Despite fuel shortages, pilot losses, and constant Allied air superiority, German jet pilots could still achieve remarkable feats. Second, it highlights the innovation and desperation of late-war Luftwaffe tactics. The use of R-4M rockets against fighters was not standard doctrine. It was improvisation born of necessity. Third, and perhaps most importantly, it represents one of the last aerial combats of the European war. Within weeks, Germany would surrender. The Me-262 pilots who survived would never fly their jets in combat again. The era of jet versus piston aerial combat was essentially over before it had truly begun. Today, aviation historians continue to debate the details of Hagenah's engagement. Some accept his account, others remain skeptical. What is not in dispute is that on April 10, 1945, Walter Hagenah achieved something unique: destroying an enemy fighter with an unguided rocket while flying one of the most advanced aircraft in the world. Whether it was 1 Mustang or 2, the feat itself was extraordinary. The Messerschmitt Me 262 represented a glimpse of aviation's future, deployed in the desperate final months of a dying regime. In different circumstances, with adequate production, fuel and trained pilots, it might have posed a serious threat to Allied air superiority. But history is written by what happened, not what might have been. Walter Hagenah's story reminds us that even in those final chaotic days, individual acts of courage and skill still mattered. German pilots like Hagenah continued to fight, not because they believed in victory, but because it was their duty as they understood it. 1 confirmed kill, perhaps 2. We may never know the full truth. But the story of Leutnant Walter Hagenah and his rocket-armed Me-262 remains one of the most intriguing footnotes in the history of aerial warfare. Please support Apache Archives by liking and subscribing to our channel. It helps us greatly, thank you.